G'day. In the previous podcast episode, I introduced the term cognitive dissonance and commented how we can recognise it in ourselves when we are doing, receiving or experiencing something we don't believe we deserve. Some people are more able than others to handle this mental conflict. Why? Well, possibly the answer comes back to the time their beliefs were being formed. As young children, they were probably allowed to feel secure and loved, no matter what they did. They were probably told constantly that their parents, or whoever was looking after them, loved them very much. They may also have been hugged, cuddled, and affectionately touched a lot too. All these experiences are extremely important for a child in the first 3 or 4 years of their life. Indeed, some developmental experts say you should hug your child and tell them you love them at least a dozen times a day, even when they're teenagers. In truth, we all love being told we're loved by people special to us. We might moan, "Here they go again," but secretly our self-esteem gets a nice big boost each time they do. This feeling of security, formed from our early experiences in childhood, sets the pattern or the rule for the rest of our life, and it'll take some major events to change it. When a person, no matter what age, feels secure about him or herself and truly deeply loved by those important to them, they have no need for some of the games many adults play. Secure adults do not need to try and manipulate people by using guilt. Similarly, they cannot be manipulated by others who try to use guilt on them. Additionally, secure people are not afraid to ask for what they want, rather than try and maneuver and manipulate others to give them what they want. Secure people don't try to bolster their own fragile ego by putting others down. Secure people genuinely like themselves and don't try to put themselves down or diminish what they do or have done. Secure people are proud of their achievements, no matter how big or small they might seem to others. Secure people don't really care what others think about them, especially those who would try and put them down. Secure people are genuine in their relationships with others and make you feel a little bit better each time you talk with or see them. As you can imagine, insecure people are the opposite. They moan, they complain, they maneuver, they scheme, they scowl, they use guilt on others, and they are generally no great fun to be with for long periods. So how do you become a secure person and not an insecure one? Again, our security or insecurity is a direct result of our early childhood experiences. Given a warm, loving, supportive, encouraging and forgiving environment, most children would turn out secure. But, unfortunately, not every family home is like that. In fact, very few are. The parents have their own self-schemas, and this impacts how they raise their children. For example, if a parent believes children should be seen and not heard, and thrashed daily, then the children, when they become parents themselves, will probably carry some of the same beliefs with them. Even if the children go up to vow that they'd never do things like their parents did to them, very often in times of crisis or exhaustion, despite all the best will in the world, they will fall back on the patterns of child rearing they were taught by example. When we are small, we look to our parents as all-knowing and wise in the ways of the world. We believe whatever they do is the right thing to do. By the time we're old enough to find enough information to prove them wrong, it is probably too late, and these beliefs are set in concrete. Only hard work over a prolonged period can help get rid of them. Our rules are scripted at a very early age. Judith Hudson, in Mark Bennett's excellent book, The Child as Psychologist, notes how children as young as 16 months are able to learn and use scripts to help them react effectively with the world. By script, I mean the mental ordering of a series of predictable actions, locations, people, and props that constitute events. In other words, what is likely to happen when a certain something happens. We eat, but before we can eat, we have to walk in, be shown a seat and given a menu, make choices, announce those choices to a member of the waiting staff, wait for the food to arrive, and finally pick up our cutlery. Each is an ordered process, and only rarely can the order be shuffled around or skipped entirely. As the child grows, the number of experiences of any particular script increase. For example, a child of 3 has only a few, if any, experiences of children's birthday parties. By the age of 5, the child will probably have clocked up a few more, and by the age of 10 will probably be an old hand at birthday parties, knowing what the expected level of behaviour is, what the games will probably be, when the cake will arrive, and whether thank you cards will need to be written. So, if a child has scripts for understanding and predicting events and others' behaviour, doesn't it seem logical that it also has scripts and rules for its own behaviour? If a child is constantly told, no, don't, stop it, behave, whenever it explores the world and tries to do something, it comes as no surprise to learn that this child develops a script that says something along the lines of, trying something interesting will be followed by being told off. The child learns not to try, not to explore, not to be curious. It expects to be told off. This expectation fuels the child's sense of self, its own self-identity. Identity is a key issue, and I'll describe in more detail the whys and wherefores of identity in the next episode. But for now, let's accept that a child's identity, its sense of self, shapes its behaviour, and in turn shapes its adult behaviour, expectations and identity. We carry the mental and emotional baggage from childhood through to our adult lives, and it takes considerable effort to rid ourselves of some of this harmful legacy. Our experiences as an infant are crucial. During our early years, we learn how to behave, what to do, what will hurt us, and what will give us pleasure. As children, we find ways of increasing pleasure and reducing pain. These ways then get repeated enough or reinforced to become habits. Depending on how those around us react to us in the first few years of our life, these habits will either help us achieve our potential as adults or hold us back. As adults, we have the mental complexity to be able to think of the consequences of our actions, as well as delay our gratification. In other words, we can rationally see that if we make effort now, such as go to work, we can reap the benefit later, such as get paid so we can go to the cinema, eat, live in a nice house, drive a nice car, and so on. If we work on a principle of instant gratification, we decide not to go to work, but just spend all our day playing pool or computer games or watching television, as examples. We know that if we sow now, we can reap the rewards later, and that if we don't sow, we can't reap. Young children don't have this skill. They just want the good stuff there and then, here and now. They don't realise that eating all the sweets in the bag now means there'll be none left for tomorrow. As they grow and develop, they'll hopefully eventually learn to delay their gratification, to put a little aside for the next day. But it takes a while and it's not a natural impulse. The 4-year-old son of a friend of mine wants to immediately spend all the pocket money he gets from visiting relatives rather than save it up to buy a really big toy. Even when we suggest such a delaying strategy, he's not interested. Patience has not yet become him. He wants the good stuff now, the pleasurable stuff. He strives for and thrives on pleasurable experiences and does all he can to avoid the painful stuff. He has very quickly learnt not to put his hand on a hot stove or not to open the oven door while the oven is on. He has learnt that being polite to grown-ups is more likely to get him what he wants than being rude would. He has learnt that listening to his parents means that they are more likely to listen to him and give him what he wants. He has learnt some of the rules of social life. Incidentally, he taught his parents this first. When they started listening to him more, he responded by listening to them more. It comes back to sowing and reaping. They sowed the harvest by actually listening to him. Later on, they then reaped the reward of him actively listening in return. His rule learning comes in 2 flavours: self-taught and by example. He has watched others and in some ways mimicked them, and he has taken his collection of experiences and formed his own set of rules and expectations of how the world runs. Both forms of learning directly influence his sense of self. He knows he is loved because his mother has constantly told him he is, and he knows he can try things within safe reason without fear of hearing her loud, disapproving voice, because she encourages him to explore and find out for himself the consequences of his actions. And she helps him make sense of the results of his experiments by talking it through with him. As a result, she has a little boy who is very confident, independent, happy, secure, and who loves cuddles and stories. His two forms of learning, self-directed and imitation, guide his expectations and, in turn, his behaviour. So it is with us. It becomes an interesting cycle. Our experiences shape our expectations, which in turn shape our behaviour, which in turn shapes our experience, and so on. But what is the glue that holds all of this together? What glue sticks our early experiences together and directs our behaviour in adult life? As I've mentioned before, our identity is key to our development. It is the glue which binds the three elements of experience, expectation, and expression together. But what exactly is identity? Well, that's the topic of our next episode. And that's this episode of the Possible Self podcast wrapped up. If you'd like to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss anything, head to Apple Podcasts and search for the podcast by name. That is, How to Be Your Possible Self. And you can always email me at lee@leehopkins.com. Please put possible self as the subject of the email, because I receive around 60 emails a day and I'd hate to miss yours in the pile. Next episode, we'll look at the power of identity to either help us or hinder us in our quest for our possible self.